I'm Devin Dabney,
I'm Chris Hampton.
and this is how
Hip-hop taught me
Hip-hop taught me creativity, playfulness, humility, courage, motherhood.
everything.
Okay, first off, if you've not listened to this week's episode, A Tribe Called Quest taught me authenticity, you should go do that. Because it's a music and talk podcast, it's only available on Spotify. With Spotify Premium, you're able to listen to the full song. In this case, Check the Rhyme immediately after the episode. All right, before we get into the question I prepped you with, another pop question because I love these. Same rules as always, no explanation. Low End Theory or Midnight Marauders?
Low End Theory. That's the
Oh, dang, we agree on one.
Low End Theory is the one that's like got the red person on the cover, right?
Well, yeah,
It's like black
it's
and
it's this one, the one with Check the Rhyme. And
definitely Low End Theory.
we got the jazz and scenario and ooh, yeah.
for sure. Low End Theory. That's easy for me. Do you like that album more too? Is that your choice?
That's my favorite album of all time, best album ever created of any genre, period.
It's kind of hard to argue with that, honestly. I mean, it is a fantastic album, but yeah, we agree. Usually it is split, isn't it?
It is usually split. So, all right. Okay, since this week's lessons episode was about authenticity, what is the most ridiculous lie or exaggeration that you've ever heard come out of a rapper's mouth?
So when you asked me this at first, initially I was about to put on blast some people that I grew up with rapping, but I decided that wasn't very nice because we all were lying back then, you know. But I just remembered a lot of stuff talking about like moving like hundreds of bricks and like killing, like it's just like these outrageously but I thought that was a little too easy. And my actual answer may also be kind of cheating because I feel like Rick Ross is an easy target at this point. But it's really hard to not say my favorite of this is, I know Pablo Noriega, the real Noriega. He owe me 100 favors. Do I have to explain why this is my favorite? It's just the fact.
Oh man.
I think it's the fact that he went on to say the real Noriega, like to really hammer it in. And, you know, I just have a hard time believing that he knows Pablo nor Noriega. So,
yeah, I'm thinking he does not as well. I do love, though, the whole like that this generation, and I'm using the term generation very loosely, but has really embraced the actor side of rapping instead of being all about let's keep it real, you know?
mm-hmm.
I do love that. I love these larger than life figures they create.
I do too. And I say all that about Rick Ross, saying also loving his music. Like I think my favorite album of his is Mastermind. And it is very much like, it is practically like a Greek myth, you know, like just the level of, he'll say stuff like 17, I was charging niggas 17. And I know a lot of it isn't meant literally, but just like, it's so like impossible, you know, that it just is like, I'm with it, you know, like, so I mean,
that's a good call.
it just and I do want to say one honorable mention that I think is on that level. It's I can't remember what Jay-Z song it is. I think it's on Blueprint, where he says, lost 92 bricks, had to fall back, knocked a nigga off his feet, but I crawled back. 92 bricks. 92, Chris. Like that's literally millions of dollars of cocaine lost. Who's gonna, I
Just
feel like there would
lost.
be some sort of inquiry.
It fell out of his pocket.
Yeah, like I feel like the Cocaine Better Business Bureau would not give this man any more if they heard that he had lost 92 bricks. But anyway, I don't know if it's meant to be literal or not, but just that level of exaggeration is just far more than I can like deal with, you know.
Yeah, that's a bad business decision, Jay-Z.
Like, who gave JC Coke after this? Like, who was like, well, he lost 92 bricks, but he's a good dude, you know? I believe in him. So, oh gosh.
Yep.
Okay. I
Mine
really,
is
yeah.
mine is not necessarily the biggest exaggeration I've ever heard, but it's certainly my favorite. And that is 50 Cent from the song Wanksta.
Hmm.
He says, "We ride around with guns the size of Lil Bow Wow." This was 2002. Bow Wow was 15.
Hmm.
He's probably somewhere around 5'5" at that point. That's a big ass gun 50's rolling around with.
He's rolling around with like a Browning M. I can't even remember the giant machine
Mounted on
gun.
the roof.
And like, this is why like I hesitated to like, I don't mean to like call out rappers because some of the exaggeration is on purpose, like right, like
Yeah,
it's meant to be ridiculous, but it's what's that called, a hyperbole, right, where you're obviously like over
yeah,
exaggerating it to be like, yeah, this is a big ass gun. um it just, rap is so, it's in that weird space where half of the people still believe they're telling the truth, and so like, but stuff
yeah.
like this makes it obvious that they're just like talking shit.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it's one of the great things about hip hop,
Hmm.
it hip hop was born in a culture that was being held down for all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
So showing out is just part of black music, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And just yeah, I mean, it's I guess it depends on how you take it, right? And that's why like that idea of portraying this larger than life drug kingpin is like, it's in line with hip hop culture because yeah, like a lot of it is just like showing out and like maybe perhaps feeling like you're this larger than life figure, and
Right.
writing from that perspective. But it's just such a gray area because like, a lot of people still believe that rappers are like telling the truth.
I know.
um
I mean, right now as we record this, there are lyrics being used in court cases,
yeah, yeah, that's
to
that's it. It's
it's
like, dude, how do you guys think that these people are telling you the truth? Like, I mean, you can't even really, even if they are telling the truth in their lyrics, you can't, I don't know, you can't really use it. I mean, we could have a whole episode about this, but it's just, it's like they don't want to take us seriously, but then when something happens, oh, well, but you said in your song you killed so and so, so it must be true. Just like double
yeah.
standards like always.
I mean, just imagine the prosecutor in court, like, well, it says right here, Mr. Jackson was riding around with a 5'7" weapon.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Or
You
like,
know,
I have on the transcript that Rick Ross quote was selling dope straight off the iPhone, which is also, I didn't mention that, but that is another one of my
that's
favorites.
a great one.
Yeah, just like, I don't know what app he found that allows you to sell dope, but that's pretty
There's an app
cool.
for that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Oh my god, dude.
Love it. How old were you in 1991?
What month? I may have not been born yet.
I think September.
I was 3 months old in September of 1991.
All right, then let me set the scene for you here because this album came out in 1991. The
Mhm.
song was the first single off of it. Um, Earlier that year, we had gotten DJ Quick, Quick is the Name,
Yeah.
Gangstar, Step in the Arena, Jizza, Words from the Genius, De La Soul is Dead,
Mm.
Main Source Breaking Atoms, and two of maybe the most classic self-titled albums ever, Cypress Hill and Naughty by Nature.
Man. Wow, what a year for hip hop. Maybe that's why I was born.
Incredible year. Incredible. However, like I mentioned in this lessons episode, the radio in Cincinnati was pretty much playing Vanilla Ice, Gerardo, Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch,
Mhm.
and there was another bad creation in there, which I actually quite liked. Really fun, I can't lie. But then we get the Low End Theory, which was totally different. It felt like this seismic shift that
Mm,
was akin to like when Straight Outta Compton first dropped.
yeah.
And actually Q-Tip says that he and Ali would ride around listening to Straight Outta Compton, and they would talk about, we have to make this.
Yeah.
And that's what the Low End Theory was. Like, they stepped up their game so much to make this sonic project that just changed everything.
Man, this era of hip hop is probably like one of my favorites, if not the favorite. Like the Afrocentric, like everyone's
Mhm.
wearing like the African print clothes and the necklaces, and um, it's funny that you like. It was cool to hear that Tribe was what taught you authenticity, because I feel like I had a similar experience with De La Soul, like
Mm.
very much that same, like, oh, I can just be who I am and that's okay. But I was curious, since you're kind of setting the scene, one of the most memorable things about this song specifically is I think it's probably the earliest example I can think of where they used a pure bass line. Like, I feel like rap
Mm.
was using, up to that point, was using a lot of like, actual basses. And this is like, I mean, you know what I'm talking about. When that bass hits, it's like, so it sounds amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, like, maybe I'm forgetting earlier examples of that. Was that like pretty, how important was that sound at this time?
I mean, it may have happened. I can't say whether it did or didn't happen before that, but certainly this was the album that kind of hipped me to the idea that you could use upright bass on a rap song.
Mm-hmm.
Jazz period. There was sprinkling of it, but there was not an album that felt like a jazz album.
Yeah.
This was really the first time that it felt like jazz. Q-Tip feels like he's scatting, like it's
Yeah.
boom bap, like it's bebop. It's just a whole different thing. And they did bring in, not for this song in particular, but they brought in Ron Carter, who was a famous jazz session player around New York, to play on this album.
Mm-hmm.
So they had some live bass, upright bass happening in the studio while they were recording, and they're definitely trying to capture that feel here. And I think it's interesting you picked up on that,
Mm-hmm.
because it's definitely one of the things that hit me first. Like, it sounds so different than the bass lines we were getting elsewhere.
Yeah, it did. And I mean, even with the upright bass being used, I still think that the like the synthesized bass that they use in the chorus, like that hits so heavy. Like
Hmm.
that's actually, I don't know. It just it's very iconic, like the way that the beat comes in and then the bass like totally change, it feels like it changes the beat entirely. And
Yeah.
then they go into the verse and it's like, oh, we're not going to use the synthesized bass anymore. We're going to use the upright bass. Yeah, just
Yeah,
totally
they
cool.
do that on this song, and it's a thing I wish happened more often in hip hop, where the the hooks and the verse sound kind of drastically different, and
Mm-hmm.
it's the thing that ties them together is the voices of the MCs,
Yep.
and the feel in general, but the instruments are different. In this case, they're all samples. The samples are radically different.
Yep.
They feel totally different. It's very cool. And
Y-
up until this time, it was like mostly just loops that would play with a drum break behind it, and it didn't change a whole lot throughout songs.
mm-hmm.
This was one of the first times I think it actually felt like this musical composition as opposed to just a sample and a drum break.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, even to your point, like you were telling me just now how Straight Outta Compton inspired them to make this. And even that album, like a lot of those beats are loops, like
Hmm.
yeah, Straight Outta Compton, the song itself, like Gangsta Gangsta, Fuck the Police, like those are all loop. And I'm not saying that's bad, but I agree with you. It feels more like songwriting, where it's less about the origins of hip hop, which was like looping a drum break and then, you know, hyping the crowd up. It's more like, okay, we're gonna make a verse and then a chorus, and we're gonna do that also with the music. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And we haven't talked a lot about sampling on this show. Um, it can seem on its surface really easy. Like you hear somebody play something you like and you just take that and make a new song from it. Like it sounds really easy and it sounds nefarious or something, like
Yeah.
you're just straight up stealing. And sometimes that's the case, you
Yeah.
know, it's just people will just take a straight loop it up, rap over it, it's done. You know,
Yeah.
that certainly happens and can be, you know, can be a hit, can be a great song.
Mm-hmm.
But what Tribe was doing here is totally different. And I had gone down a rabbit hole actually a couple of months ago on Bob Power, who was the engineer who recorded and mixed this album and Midnight Marauders. And he had done work with De La Soul and a couple of other native tongue groups as well. And he gets shouted out on the album quite a few times throughout this and Midnight Marauders.
Mm-hmm.
And Q-Tip has credited him with like figuring out how to put that amount of low end, under the heavy kicks and snares and have everything still sound clean
Yeah.
and, you know, still work together sonically.
Yeah.
And so I went down a rabbit hole and was listening to interviews with him, and I pulled this clip out of him talking about this album.
The Low End Theory was an interesting record because, in a way, it's the Sgt. Pepper's of hip hop. It's a record that changed the way people thought about putting music together. Until then, and I'm not a big hip hop historian, I just know the stuff that I've worked on. But until then, if people used samples, it was pretty much one loop that played throughout. They didn't put together a bunch of different samples. It was the beginning of a wave where people were making really elaborate musical constructions out of samples from different places. And not only could it not have been played by regular players, but it wouldn't have, because the cool thing is that they weren't made to go together in the first place.
I think that's really cool that he mentions, like, nobody would have played this the way that it got put together. And in a lot of cases, it couldn't have been played like this. Like our fingers just won't play it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really fascinating and says a lot about the skill of what Q-Tip and Ali were doing here. It's not clear who produced this beat exactly, because Q-Tip has kind of always looked at it more as the collective, both in this and when he was like in the production company with Dilla and D'Angelo and that crew. It was always just credited as the Ummah, and this whole album is just credited as produced by a Tribe Called Quest. So we suspect it's Q-Tip because he's just one of the best beat makers in history, you know. But this, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna add that, like, you were talking about how people say sampling is easy, or like it. Yeah, I think that I think you would have to try to sample something and make it sound good to understand how hard it is. It isn't just, I mean, sometimes it is, but a lot of times, like what Kanye does or what Tribe was doing, like it isn't as easy as just finding a song and like slowing it down. Like you really have to understand how it works. And yeah, like just underlining everything you just played and just said.
Yeah, and this song in particular, Check the Rhyme, it's not a great example of like chopping up a bunch of samples, but it does pull from a bunch of different sources and put it all together. There are either 7 or 8 different samples that create this song. Pretty much every sound you hear in this is from a different song. 3 or 4 different drum pieces are brought in, and there are kind of 3 main most recognizable samples, and I pulled up the original songs that they're from, and then I looped up the pieces that Q-Tip took. So
Cool.
since we haven't really talked about sampling on this show, let's go through these
Heck
a
yeah.
little bit. This first one is the main melody of the verses. It's from Minnie Riperton's Baby This Love I Have.
Immediately, yeah.
The things I say and do may not come clear through.
Minnie Riperton's voice.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the hard things about sampling. When I hear that, I'm like, oh my God, I want her voice.
I know. Yeah.
On this.
I guess vocal sample. Well, no, vocal samples were being used back then too. I think it was more common to rip the instruments than the voices.
Yeah, that's what they were looking for sure. And that, I think that part is obvious if you've heard Check the Rhyme. Here's the part that Q-Tip took, looped up. Just the main part. And that just loops over and over to create the bass for the verses. All right, next up is the main horn sample. I don't think you can even hear this horn sample and not think of Tribe Called Quest at this point. It's from the Average White Band's Love Your Life. White guys got some funk.
Yeah, I don't know why they call themselves the Average White Band, because they either need to be like the above average.
Yeah.
White band. Yeah, like they need to be like either above average white band or the low key black band, like secretly black band. There's a song they do. There was like this compilation on Instagram one time of all these songs that you thought were by black people but were actually by white people, and I can't think of the song. There's a song they do that is like, I swear to God, I thought it was all like, for my whole life, thought some black person did this song. But yeah, they're,
how could you not?
They're good, dude. And of course they would serve as the bass, like the like bass sample for a native tongue song,
Yeah, totally. Exactly. And here's that horn looped up the way Q-Tip used it. Maybe cut a little bit short. Yeah. That's the basics of it. And then last one we're going to look at here is, this one surprised me a little bit when I went looking. It's a drum pattern, and the drums from Check the Rhyme are from various places, largely from Hydra by Grover Washington. This pattern, though, is one that stands out for me. And as soon as I hear it, it takes me to Check the Rhyme, even though it's in a rap song that came out before Check the Rhyme. It's from Biz Marquis's Nobody Beats the Biz.
Okay. Yeah, of course.
And he takes that like little quick chunk where the kicks just play over and over again, and it sounds like this when he loops it up. And it's got a little horn stab at the end.
Yeah. It was the beginning of the Pharrell start.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's where Pharrell modeled the 4-count.
He heard that as a child, or however old he was back then, and was like,
trying to be Q-Tip.
I get it. I see it now. I've got the download.
Yeah. And for the folks who who haven't heard Check the Rhyme enough to like put all that together, I'm going to play just a little quick piece of Check the Rhyme that includes all of those samples we just played.
On the boulevard, I landed. We used to kick routines, and the presence was fitting. It was I, the abstract, and me, the 5-footer.
Yeah,
so good.
You know, in the vein of talking about mixing, I think another thing that's great about this song is just how well the bass and kick work together. I think because I mean, you heard all those samples, they were mixed to be by themselves, so having the bass and kick kind of like sandwiched together, like have the like you're ducking down parts of the bass and ducking down parts of the kick so that it like fits perfectly together. That's another thing I love about this song is when the bass comes in, it just fits so well in there. Like the Bismarck key sample I'm talking about, they just filtered it so that like the low end is gone and it's just that like humming sound. So good.
Yeah, it's incredible, really. You should go down the Bob Power rabbit hole and listen to some interviews with him. He's a professor now. I think at NYU. I might be getting that wrong. But he teaches music and mixing and engineering and maybe some musical theory or something. But really brilliant guy. And he talked about in one of the interviews I listened to about making this album, Tip and Ali would kind of give him what they wanted the feel of things to be. And he would want to know, like, what's the main sample that should be the thing that's on top, that's the main focus. And he would like gather all this information, and then he would spend all this time cleaning up all these old samples and getting them to work together. And of course it's this, sonic shift. But then when Midnight Marauders came around, Tip and Ali came to him and was like, don't clean anything up. We want it to sound dirty and dusty and gritty and more street, so he had to totally shift the way he had engineered their first album to create Midnight Marauders.
I'm wondering now, like thinking back to, I mean, it's been a little while since I've listened to Midnight Marauders, but I'm curious now to go back and try to listen to it for that quality of
same
feeling a little more unrefined on purpose. Okay.
Yeah, it's super interesting to me. I love hearing from those people who were making these things and how they made them and what they thought of them at the time.
Yeah. I mean, I said this already, I'm sure, but just like even just that era of hip hop where things were starting to change so drastically, and just just like leaning into like even more so leaning into the roots of like of Black people music, jazz and and just like again the Afrocentricity, like another group that I think of from this era that may not be as popular but I still love is the Jungle Brothers. The album,
for sure.
Is it Straight Out the Jungle? Is that the name of the album where they're in the jungle and they're like peeking out? Like
that sounds right. Yeah.
It's, oh my God, I love that album. Yeah, man, I wish that I had found this music sooner too, like I mean you got it right when it came out, right? But I actually didn't find like this era of hip hop probably till I was like 17 or 18 actually. So I missed out on a lot of years.
An interesting story about finding this, I talk about how I actually heard this song for the first time in the Lessons episode. And I had heard Tribe before, like I had heard Bonita Applebum and I Left My Wallet in El Segundo off of their first album, but I wasn't entirely sold by it. And I was trying to think about why I wasn't totally sold. And I think I hit on the reason. It was art class, I think my freshman year of high school. there was there was a guy in there who was also a hip hop head,
Mm-hmm.
and another white dude, and he was constantly, rapping during class and listening to music during class, and he would play Tribe a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And that might actually be the first time I ever heard Tribe was from him.
Mm-hmm.
But later that year, his name was also Kris, and we had these art projects, these big drawings we were doing, these huge charcoal drawings, and we had them in our racks. And mine is missing one day when I come in.
Uh-oh.
And we find it in his rack. He had erased my last name and put his last name. He had failed to change the spelling of his first name because he spells his Chris.
Yeah.
So it said Kris and then his last name. He just tried to jack my charcoal drawing. So I think I attached Tribe to this dude and in turn didn't like it because of that.
I mean,
That's all I can figure.
he sampled your drawing, I feel like it was pretty. I don't know what the problem is. We just talked about how sampling can sometimes feel like stealing, but
it was a puffy version of sampling. He just took the thing and made it his, period.
Holy shit. The clearly this gentleman did not think this through. Like, did he think that
not even a little bit.
Did he think that like you would just be like, "Oh, well, I guess it says his name, so I guess it's
he drew
his."
it.
Like, shit, I didn't draw this. Or like I don't know. Like there was just not a lot of thought. How old were y'all? There was not a lot of thought in this.
No, freshman year of high school. So old enough to know that's a bad call.
Yeah, good grief. I just can't get over he sampled your drawing. He's like, "What? What's the problem?" Holy shit. Yeah,
Oh,
I
man.
understand that. I think that's one thing about music that can kind of be like a pain, is that especially for me, I associate very strongly like music with memories, good or bad. And so yeah,
Same.
like a shitty relationship can ruin a song for me, or like a great memory can enhance a song for me. And so yeah, I could see why like you would probably not want to listen to Tribe. If that totally makes sense.
And back when I first heard this song, I mean, it was exactly in the way that I talk about in the episode, where I would go to sleep, I would hit play, record, pause on the tape deck, set my alarm so that I'd wake up when the ICD radio show was coming on, record the radio show, and then I'd listen to it on the bus in the morning. And that's the first time I heard Check the Rhyme. And I remember at the time it feeling a little lonely, like nobody else around me was listening to this music, and I was having to like dig for it and really try to hear what was out there. And then just recently I was listening to Nas's podcast, The Bridge, and he talks about that's how he was finding music in Queensbridge. There were these late night radio shows, and he would hit play, record, pause on his tape deck and record it and listen to it the next day. And I was like, what?
That's really cool.
Blown away by it. And then also listening to Talib Kweli's podcast. He had High Tech on, and High Tech is from Cincinnati, and he talked about ICD's radio show.
Man.
First time I've ever heard anybody else talk about ICD. But he talked about him as one of the like leading figures of hip hop in Cincinnati. So,
dude,
I love when this shit all comes full circle.
Yeah, it's really amazing because I mean, you got to grow up in hip hop culture when it was still small. I mean, like even when it was big, quote unquote, like when it was like making these international hits, the community was still relatively small. So it's not even that like it's not even that implausible that you might have been doing the same things as all these other people. And yeah, I really envy that you you grew up in that era of hip hop. I mean, I'm sure I've said it before, but I just imagine it like backpackers roaming the land and like rap battling people. And I would have loved that era. Like if I were a teenager in that era, that would have been me. So that's
Yeah.
super cool.
I do feel pretty lucky to have grown up in the era that I did and where I did.
Mm-hmm.
We definitely got a lot of spillover from New York, Chicago, Philadelphia. A lot of the Midwest and East Coast hip hop ended up coming through Cincinnati at some time.
Yeah, that's another thing too, is like you were also in a region where like their hip hop sound was still kind of developing, you know? I mean, like for a
Yeah,
while it was just the East and West Coast show. And then like I mean, I feel like the South has always been underplayed, but I mean, they
for
obviously are a
sure.
huge role in hip hop culture. But yeah, the Midwest like wasn't, I wouldn't say on like the hip hop map until, I don't know, like I think maybe in the 90s, and like and then you know with Tech and Nelly and those people starting to become big, like it
Hmm.
started to show up as like, oh, like the Midwest is like a place. And I mean obviously like you have Atmosphere, you have, there's a lot of people, and of course like Eminem, but do you get what I'm saying? Like you were in like,
Yeah.
you were in like you were in it as it was forming into what it was going to be. Like it was a new culture that was influenced by all these other cultures around it, but it was, you know, in a matter of 10 years after this album came out, it was going to be its own place, you know.
Yeah, I was listening to an interview with the guys from Tanya Morgan, Don Will and Von P, and Don Will is from Cincinnati, came up in the same like
Mhm.
time period that I did, and he talked about how Cincinnati was like in this perfect geographical location to
Mhm.
get East Coast sound, West Coast sound, and the South was like trickling into
Mhm.
what the rappers in Cincinnati were making, and kind of that, you know, Midwest era in general. So yeah, definitely feel lucky.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things we have not talked about at all yet that I think is is maybe what makes this album as good as it is kind of the, you know, the resurgence of, or the initial surgence, is that a word? Surgence
Yeah.
of
It is today.
of Fife.
Yeah.
Um, on the first album, he's only on 4 songs. I think he's, you know, what I've heard since, what they talk about in the documentary and I've heard in interviews, is that he kind of wasn't taking it seriously. He's just like rapping for the fun of it on that
Right.
first album. And in this one, it was, okay, you have to take this serious. And he really went for his on this album.
Mhm.
And he's like the Fife is like the everyman representative, you know?
Mhm.
Q-Tip is kind of like the cool guy that everybody wants to be, you
Mhm.
know, whereas Fife is like just an average dude.
Yeah.
And it's an industry where everybody wanted to look and act like they were indestructible, you
Mhm.
know, and still do to a big degree. Here's Fife calling himself the funky diabetic and always talking about how short he is, you
Yeah.
know. Just seemed like this regular dude who loved the Knicks and battle rapping on the corner. Like,
Yeah.
stark contrast to everything else that was going on at the time. And I don't know if there could have been a B.O.B. or a Mac Miller or a Kanye,
Yeah.
any of these rappers who are okay with being self-deprecating
Yeah.
without Fife.
Yeah, and I hadn't even really considered it that way until I listened to your episode once again. I mean, it just I guess because that kind of like honest sort of perspective on yourself is something that I was already drawn to in hip hop when I found Tribe. It fit right into my like music palette, you know, like yeah, by that
Mhm.
time, I mean, I was 18 when I found like I knew who they were, but like I went through this phase um in my teenage years where I was like, I'm just gonna like do my hip hop history. Like I'm gonna listen to as much music as I
Yeah.
can. And I went through Tribe's discography at that point, and yeah, I mean, just the way he rapped didn't even seem that weird because of what I like to listen to. But yeah, just you
Sure,
brought that
sure.
back into perspective for me of like, oh yeah, like it's women don't like men that are short. So why would you say why would you say that you're and I don't
Yeah.
yeah, like it just I just didn't even consider it because it was like, yeah, I mean, but rappers always talk about their flaws. Well, at least now they do. So yeah, that for 1991, that's pretty next level.
Yeah, it definitely felt like a shift. Felt like something different. And I feel like I didn't really give Fife his credit
hmm
for a long time, you know? It felt like Q-Tip was the one carrying everything. And I do love some Q-Tip solo work.
Yeah.
But it's not as good as when Fife is there. It's not as good
Yeah.
as when Ali is there. It's not as good as when Jerobi, is there as a spiritual advisor of some sort, So
Yeah.
they definitely had something really special.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've kind of given me permission to say this and feel like I won't get in trouble, but I'll tell you from my perspective as an 18-year-old, like aspiring hip hop historian, that Phife was the best rapper out of all of them. Like I liked
Mm,
Q-Tip because of who he was, and obviously he's a great like beat maker, and he's like kind of the RZA of a tribe. But I didn't necessarily think he was like I didn't think he was as good of a rapper as Phife was. To me, he was
mm,
always like Phife was always the best, and Q-Tip was just he was the leader, and and obviously he can rap. But do you get what I'm saying? Like to me,
yeah, totally.
it's and there are people like that part of what makes them so great is that when they are in a position to lead that they become a leader, like people
Hmm.
like a Tyler the creator or like a RZA that I mentioned earlier. Like part of what makes them who they are is the fact that they are a leader. So when you take away um their followers, if you will, like it changes them. And I'm not saying that they have to be leaders. Like obviously Tyler can make music on his own and all that, but yeah, there's just something different about Tyler the creator as a solo artist versus when he was leading this gang of like badass kids,
Right. Yep.
or yeah.
I think this song is the first time Q-Tip refers to himself as the abstract, I
Mhm.
think. Um, and that perfectly encapsulates what you're talking about. Q-Tip is great, no question.
Mhm.
Um, but he was much more abstract
Yeah.
and willing to go in a bunch of different directions.
Yeah.
Whereas Fife was your favorite rapper's favorite rapper.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, and that's you even kind of pointed out another correlation between those three that I just mentioned is that they're all like strangely different than the people that they're with, like
Hmm.
Tyler is very different than the rest of the Odd Future crew, and the
Yeah.
RZA is very different than the rest of the
Hmm.
Wu-Tang Clan. Like
Yeah.
they're all like these deep, like visionary thinkers, and being a
Yeah.
visionary isn't
Totally.
necessarily about executing. It's more about like surrounding yourself with people who can help you execute and letting you sit in this space of big ideas, so I think all
Yep.
three of those and probably more people if I really thought about it could like that's kind of how the leader of the hip hop collective usually works.
Yeah. I mean, RZA knows he needs a Raekwon who's gonna just go hard,
Yeah.
just bars. He knows he needs that.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
same here. Interesting fact I came across while researching for this. I'm curious, what was your first rap name?
Do I have to say it?
Oh
I'm
yeah,
like trying to think. Oh Lord. Actually, okay, so
mine
sorry, go ahead, tell me.
mine was Crazy K, Krazeek.
Yeah.
That was my first rap name.
I actually think my first rap name was pretty tame. It was just Deuce. Because I really
Okay.
like the number two and two D's, Devin Dabney, Deuce. It all worked together.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. Q-Tips was MC Love Child, and Fife's was Crush Connection.
Well, I actually kind of like that. I mean, yeah, I actually kind of like that. It would. I think it would work right now. Like if there was like You know what it sounds like? It sounds like a pop punk band, like a Paramore or
It
something,
does. Yeah, it
maybe
does.
that's why I like it. It doesn't sound like a rap name, but I do like the name.
Whenever I would like tell any of my white friends Q-Tip's name,
Mhm.
I'd be, oh, this is Q-Tip. They'd be like, what? His name is Q-Tip? And it sounds so normal to me now, but when you think
Right.
about it, Q-Tip is a very strange name, but it's definitely better than MC Lovechild. So
I don't know, I think MC Lovechild may be the name of my next album if I can, like, work something out. That's
uh,
pretty hilarious. I mean, what? He was probably a teenager when he thought of that? I'd be like, the,
yeah, I mean, he was a teenager when he made this album, so
yeah, so
they were
I
still in high school.
he was at the painting sampling age, so I don't think that everything was thought out at that point. I mean, it's funny though because honestly, rap names do have to sound kind of silly. Like I think that
Mm-hmm.
I mean most of them sound silly, like out of context. You know, some I think nowadays like it's more like the grown up rap names, like it's more normal to name yourself after your name. You know, like Kendrick Lamar, J Cole, um, but yeah, like I mean Eminem, like it's easy to say now, but he
Right.
named himself after a candy. You know, I mean, obviously it's like Marshall Mathers, I get it, but I'm just saying Eminem. I mean, Childish Gambino got his name from a Wu-Tang name generator, you know? Like
Yeah,
just
I
the
love
first
that.
thing he saw, like, all right, that's it, Childish Gambino. What the fuck does that mean? um, and so, yeah, I don't know. It's like this weird, like middle ground where it needs to sound weird enough that it's recognizable, but not so weird that it turns off most people, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Why did he name himself
Yeah.
Q-Tip? Like, I'm wondering what the origin behind.
I don't know. I couldn't find why that is his name.
I'm dude. He probably literally was like just Q-Tip.
I believe his real name is Jonathan
So
Davis.
not
I think
even
that's his real
like you
name.
can't even say. Holy shit, that's hilarious. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I think
don't know.
yeah, that's interesting. But I think that's just such a fascinating thing about names is like some of them can have like a really deep meaning. Like Jay-Z's name has meaning. But like sometimes it's literally just like I see a Q-tip. And I don't know if that's like why he did that, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think it's funny that in this song they say Phife says, "Clean out your ears and just check the word."
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if he's like, "Yo, your name is Q-Tip.
Yeah, like he's making
Clean out
fun
your
of him.
ears."
I couldn't imagine. I don't know. I just also wonder how the name came to be because I can't imagine him being like, my name's gonna be Q-Tip, and everybody being like, word, dope, that's a good name. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what was that conversation like?
Yeah.
Oh
It
shit.
Chuck D gave Busta Rhymes his name,
Oh wow.
because his, like, aggressive style reminded him of an NFL player whose name was Buster Rhymes. So Chuck D
Wow.
named him Busta Rhymes.
Wow.
I don't think Chuck D named Q-Tip.
No, no. That what you just described was like King Arthur getting Excalibur. Like
Exactly.
damn, that's a cool. See, that's a dope. And Buster Rhymes is obviously a pretty cool name, and it just so happened, yeah, Buster Rhymes. Holy shit, what a coincidence
Yeah,
there.
amazing. What are your favorite bars on this song?
Oh man, honestly, this is one of those where it's really hard for me to pick because really I just love this whole song in its entirety. But one line that that always makes me laugh is in the beginning. When they're doing the call and response where it's like it's I the abstract and me the 5-footer, I kick the mad style, still step off the frankfurter. Like it just is so goofy. And it just
Yep.
always makes me laugh no matter how many times I hear it. So that line's
When
a great one.
I was looking at Genius,
Hmm.
just seeing what people said about the lyrics, like what their, idea of what the meaning is.
Yeah.
And for that line, it just says, what does this mean?
Oh, come on. I feel like it's pretty obvious what it means, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just like goofy. And like, yeah, I felt like it's pretty obvious. I thought you were going to tell me sometimes on Genius, they'll do this thing where they'll take incredibly obvious lines like that and they'll develop this elaborate story that's obviously not
Yeah.
true. And I actually kind of love
Yeah.
that happens sometimes.
Me too.
But that is not the line that I would pick out to be like, what does that mean?
It was somebody looking for deep meaning
Yeah, no,
and was just like, there's no deep meaning here. How can this be anything?
yeah, sometimes it is what it is, you know. But yeah, that I think that's the one that I pick out that stands out to me. But really, just the whole song just like flows together. And I guess another one I think of is when Q-Tip goes, "Record company people are shady." Like, just it just sticks out to me.
I do love that. That's one of those that, you know, when you're performing it, you don't even say that line.
Right.
You just hold the mic out to the crowd. Everybody's gonna say it. For me, I was when this came out, I was definitely really into sports history. And I was like going way back reading sports history as much as I could. And so for me, the line that really hit me that I loved was, "Got the scrawny legs, but I move just like Lou Brock with speed. I'm agile, plus I'm worth your while. 100% intelligent black child." I just love that whole phrase. And Lou Brock is, I think he's still in second place for most stolen bases ever. Damn. Behind Ricky Henderson. So I was a Lou Brock fan, and I was just blown away when he was mentioned in a rap song.
Yeah. So classic hip hop thing to refer to sports in some way. That's like such a common, that's like a go-to thing for metaphors, I feel like, is sports.
Yeah. And it's interesting that it came from Q-Tip, because Phife was definitely the sports head of the group.
Maybe he sampled Fife's rhymes.
Sampled Fife's rhymes. Just erased Fife's name. Yeah. You didn't write this.
Like, my name ain't something dumbass like Q-Tip. Like, it must. I didn't write this. It looks like I wrote it, but it says Q-Tip, so I guess he wrote it. Produced by Tribe Called Quest. Oh my god.
Yes.
Oh shit.
All right, if you're watching this on YouTube or listening to it anywhere but Spotify, you're missing half of the podcast. Every other week we release short, focused essays set to beats, followed by the full song that we're learning the lesson from. Those are only available on Spotify, at least for now. End of this season, I may figure out a way to get those out. We've got all these links, videos, things we talked about, more bonus material at the blog post for these episodes at hiphoptaughtmeeverything.com. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter. We'll see you next time for the final episode of the season, when an antisocial extrovert teaches me duality.
Woo! Stoked.